My hands were shaking, not because of the winter chill. It was the physical aftermath of a blinding migraine that had tortured me for 3 days, a direct result of the 80-hour work weeks I had pulled to finalize the Orion protocols. I stood in the hallway of the Grand Palace Hotel, holding a thick navy blue folder to my chest. I felt brittle. My doctor had warned me that my blood pressure was a ticking time bomb and that I desperately needed rest. Instead, I wore my only suit, a charcoal gray outfit that was slightly loose now because I had skipped too many meals and driven here. Inside that folder lay the future of Aegis Industries. It contained the final 8 months of system specifications, the proprietary automation protocols, and the defense contract documentation that I had personally verified at Fort Meade that morning. This was the work that had quietly stabilized the company after the near-catastrophic failure of the previous quarter. It was work that had never once been mentioned publicly, work that I had bled for, quite literally. "You can wait outside." The words hung in the air at the entrance of the ballroom. They were light, casual, but unmistakable in their finality. Conversations continued behind me in the glittering room. I heard the expensive clink of crystal glasses and the low hum of self-congratulatory laughter. Soft jazz played from a live band. No one rushed to correct the woman standing in front of me. I asked if there was a mistake, my voice barely rising above the background chatter. My throat felt dry. Victoria Vance, the company operations director, glanced at me with polite impatience. She held a clipboard, her posture rigid, her eyes scanning the room as if looking for someone more important. She was dressed in a shimmering silver gown that cost more than my car. "We are at capacity for the ceremony, Henry," she said. Her tone was the same one she used when explaining to the cleaning staff why the break room fridge needed cleaning. "This event is reserved seating, high-level stakeholders only." I blinked, the headache throbbing behind my left eye. I told her that I had the final specs of the Orion project, the very reason we were all here. I looked past her into the room. The golden light of the chandeliers washed over the crowd. Everyone from my department was already inside. Every engineer who had done the grunt work. Every project manager who had forwarded my emails, even Owen Finch, the junior hire who had joined less than a month ago and still did not know how to navigate the server, sat at a round table near the front. On the massive projection screen behind the stage, I saw it. My system diagrams, my architecture, the reflection of my life work, was literally the backdrop for their party. "I did not realize I was not included," I said. Victoria smiled thinly. "Henry, be reasonable," she said. "You are a technical contributor. Tonight is for leadership and award recipients. It is about optics. Why would we use a seat on you?" That sentence hit me hard. It was not just a rejection. It was a classification. I was equipment. I was infrastructure. I was not a person worth celebrating. The betrayal was worse than the medical diagnosis itself. My grip tightened around the folder until the cardboard bent under my fingers. The physical sensation of the paper buckling was the only thing grounding me. I felt a wave of nausea, the room spinning slightly at the edges of my vision. I had sacrificed my health for this. I had missed my niece's graduation for this. I had sat in an emergency room waiting area with a laptop on my knees for this. "Optics," I repeated. "Yes, optics," Victoria said, checking her watch. "Look, if you want to leave the folder, I can make sure Julian gets it, but you really cannot stand in the doorway. It blocks the flow for the waiters." I followed her gaze to the large screen at the front of the room. The text read, "Defense Innovation Excellence Award. The automated manufacturing system being honored was mine. Every algorithm, every safety protocol. I had written the code in the dark while Julian Thorne was at networking dinners. I had debugged the hardware on the factory floor while Victoria was selecting the color palette for the office renovation." Inside, I saw Julian stand up. He was laughing, shaking hands with General Henderson. Julian looked successful, the very image of corporate brilliance. He did not look like a man who 3 weeks ago had asked me how to open a document that was password protected. "I understand," I said quietly. Victoria's shoulders relaxed, assuming she had won. "Good. I knew you would get it, Henry," she said. "You are always so reliable. Why do you not head home? Get some rest. You look terrible." "Frankly, I might just do that," I said. I did not hand her the folder. Instead, I turned and walked toward a small table in the lobby just outside the double doors. I set the folder down. It felt incredibly heavy, as if it contained the weight of the last 20 years. I opened my laptop bag. My movements were slow, deliberate. I was not shaking anymore. A cold, strange calm had washed over the pain in my head. I took out my laptop, a personal machine, not the company-issued laptop they monitored. I opened the lid and connected to the hotel guest internet. The screen glowed blue, illuminating my face. I navigated to my draft folder. There was an email there that I had written 6 months ago during a moment of frustration and had updated every week since. It was never meant to be sent. It was a coping mechanism, a fantasy of escape. But tonight, looking at Owen adjusting his tie and Julian shaking hands with the general, the fantasy evaporated. Reality set in. But they had forgotten one crucial thing, I whispered to myself. They assumed that because they owned the servers, they owned the system. They assumed that because my name was not on the patent application, their business was safe. They forgot that my knowledge was the keystone holding the entire arch together. They forgot that a system is only as stable as the person who maintains it. I did not scream. I did not make a scene. I simply typed a single line into the body of the email, updated the recipient list, and hovered my finger over the Enter key. Please check your email. I pressed the key. Within seconds, notification chimes began echoing across the ballroom. It started as a ripple, one phone near the door, then another at the high-level table, then a sudden pause in conversation, then murmurs. I saw heads dipping down to look at screens. I saw the light from smartphones illuminating faces in the dim room. I closed my laptop, slid it back into my bag, and picked up the folder. I was not going to leave it for Julian. I was not going to leave them anything. My name is Henry Miller. I am 55 years old. At the time of that ceremony, I was the senior systems engineer at Aegis Industries, one of the fastest-growing defense contractors in the region. I was not a ladder climber. I was not a corporate politician. I came straight from military service in the Army Corps of Engineers, where I was trained that the mission came first and your ego came last. I was hired for my ability to untangle complex automation systems and find efficiency where others saw chaos. I believed in the chain of command. I believed that if you did good work, if you kept your head down and solved the problems no one else could solve, the recognition would naturally follow. I was naive. For 21 years, I gave Aegis everything. When the logistics crisis hit in 2018, I lived in the office for 3 weeks, sleeping on a cot in the server room to manually reroute our shipping algorithm. When the Orion project stalled last year, a failure that would have cost us our security clearance, it was me who found the flaw in the third-party code. I did not just find it, I rewrote the entire core architecture from scratch. I missed my 10th wedding anniversary for a deployment to a remote testing site. I missed my father's 70th birthday party because a server crashed in Tokyo. I made these sacrifices because I believed I was building something that mattered. I believed I was part of a team. But a team requires trust, and trust, I learned, was a commodity Julian Thorne did not trade in. Julian was my direct manager, though he managed very little. He was a man built for boardrooms, not server rooms. He had a smile that was polished to a high sheen, and a vocabulary filled with words like synergy, paradigm, and deliverables. Yet, he could not tell the difference between a router and a network switch. Julian had a specific talent, though. He was a master of claiming credit for others. Henry, he would say, leaning against my cubicle wall, smelling of expensive cologne and premium coffee. This report is great, really great, but it is too technical for the executives. Send me the raw data. I will polish it up for the board presentation. I thought he was helping. I thought he was translating my engineering language into business speak. What he was actually doing was erasing my name. The first time I saw my work presented without my name, I corrected him afterward casually. Julian had just smiled, patting my shoulder with a patronizing heaviness. "Relax, Henry," he said. "Leadership does not care who builds it. They care that it works. We are a team. My win is your win." But his win came with a massive bonus, while my win came with a request to work next weekend. By the time the Orion project was completed, the pattern was cemented. Julian was the visionary, and I was the mechanic. He was the genius who saved the project, and I was just the resource he managed effectively. But the antagonist in this story was not just Julian. It was the culture he represented, the polished, gleaming surface that hid the rot underneath. As I walked away from the ballroom that night, I thought about the conversation I had with Julian just 2 days prior. He had come to my desk, his eyes darting around the room to ensure we were alone. "Henry," he had said. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "The internal audit is coming up next week. I need you to make sure all the source code is on the shared drive. Everything, every note, every scrap of data on your local machine. We need full redundancy." I told him it was already there. "Double check," he insisted, his hand resting on my desk, his fingers drumming nervously. "We cannot afford any knowledge gaps. If something were to happen to you, we need to know the company is safe." Julian was not worried about my safety. He was worried about his exposure. He knew deep down that he did not understand the machine he was driving. He wanted the keys, the manual, and the title before he pushed me out of the car. He looked at me with that predatory glint hidden behind a veneer of corporate concern. He was wearing a new watch that day, an expensive luxury watch. I remembered looking at it and wondering if that was what my synergy had bought him. "Do not worry, Julian," I had told him. "The system is exactly where it needs to be." I had not lied, the system was where it needed to be. But Julian, in his arrogance, had never bothered to ask if he had the passwords to access it. I did not run to my car. I walked. I took the elevator down to the parking garage, counting the floors as the numbers ticked by in digital red. Lobby, basement 1, basement 2. With every floor I descended, I felt lighter, as if the atmospheric pressure of the last 2 decades was bleeding off me. My phone was vibrating in my pocket, a continuous angry buzz against my thigh. I did not reach for it. I knew exactly who it was. It would be Victoria first, confused and annoyed that the notification chimes were interrupting her speech. Then it would be Julian realizing that the technical glitch was actually a systemic purge. I got into my sedan, a practical 5-year-old model that I kept impeccably maintained, and sat in the silence for a moment. The leather seats were cold. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of old coffee and faint machine oil that always seemed to cling to my clothes. Then I turned on the ignition and drove out of the structure. I did not go home immediately. Instead, I drove to a 24-hour diner near the industrial park, a place where I had spent countless nights debugging code over black coffee. I needed neutral ground. I needed to watch the fallout from a safe distance. I opened my laptop on the Formica table and finally looked at the sent folder. The email I had released into the wild was titled Notice of Material Change. It was not an emotional outburst. It was a surgical strike. It contained 4 attachments, each one a calculated explosive charge designed to sever the structural integrity of Aegis Industries' operations. Attachment 1 was my formal resignation, effective immediately. It cited a specific obscure clause in my original employment contract, Clause 14B, which covered material alteration of project scope. I had flagged this clause years ago when the company was small, insisting that if my role shifted from engineering to pure maintenance without renegotiation, I could walk. HR had laughed and signed it, thinking I would never use it. Attachment 2 was the one that would hurt. It contained 3 other resignation letters. These were not copies. They were originals, digitally signed and dated for this exact moment. Over the last 6 months, as I watched Julian erode our department morale, I had quietly met with Liam from infrastructure, Alan from compliance, and Grace from logistics, who actually ran the daily operations. We had agreed to move as a unit. When I walked, they walked. Attachment 3 was a technical dependency summary. This was a polite way of saying, here is what you do not know. It was a list of 42 critical system functions that required manual oversight or specific undocumented cryptographic keys to maintain, keys that only I possessed. Keys that I was legally required to turn over upon request, but which no one at Aegis currently knew how to input. Attachment 4 was the client disclosures. This was the death blow. I had sent a formal notification to our 4 largest defense contacts, Summit Logistics, Vanguard Systems, and 2 others. The language was legally bulletproof. This letter is to inform you that the primary architect of the Orion Protocol is departing Aegis Industries. As of 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, I can no longer guarantee the integrity of the automated defense systems currently in production. I was not soliciting their business. I was warning them of a risk. And in the defense industry, risk is the only thing that moves mountains. I took a sip of the bitter diner coffee. My phone finally stopped buzzing, only to start again instantly. I glanced at the screen. Julian Thorne, 14 missed calls. Victoria Vance, 6 missed calls. Unknown number, 3 missed calls. I unlocked the phone. I did not call them back. Instead, I opened the encrypted drive on my phone where I kept my insurance policy. This was the investigation phase. I needed to be sure of what they would try next. I scrolled through the files I had archived. During the Orion project, I had noticed anomalies in the budget reports Julian submitted. He was claiming thousands of dollars in external consultation fees. I had dug deeper, tracing the internet protocol addresses of these consultants. They all led back to a shell company registered to Julian's brother-in-law, Walter Davis. The shell company was called Delta Strategic Group. Julian was not just stealing credit. He was siphoning funds. He was billing the company for expert analysis that was actually just me working overtime and pocketing the difference. I had the bank routing numbers. I had the timestamps comparing my work logs to his invoices. I sat there in the diner, the fluorescent lights humming above me, and watched the digital evidence line up like soldiers. I was not just a disgruntled employee anymore. I was the prosecutor, the judge, and the jury. The first confrontation did not happen in a boardroom. It happened over the phone at 15 minutes past 6 o'clock the next morning. I was in my kitchen making toast when the phone rang again. This time it was not Julian. It was the personal cell number of Catherine Brooks, the chief operating officer. Catherine was sharp, ruthless, and usually fair, but she had a blind spot for Julian charm. I answered on the third ring. "This is Henry," I said. "Henry." Catherine's voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the tremor of exhaustion. She had not slept. "We need to talk now." I told her I was listening. "What the hell did you do?" she snapped, the professional veneer cracking. "I have the chief executive of Summit Logistics on the other line, threatening to pull a $40 million contract because he thinks our manufacturing line is going to implode at noon." "Is it?" I told her that the manufacturing line is robust, and the Orion protocol is solid. However, the dynamic encryption keys rotate every 24 hours. They require a manual handshake from the lead architect. That is me. "Then give us the codes," she demanded. I told her I could not just give her the codes because it is a biometric sequence. It requires my fingerprint and my retinal scan on the terminal in the secure server room, a room I no longer have access to because my badge was deactivated the moment my resignation hit your inbox. There was silence on the line, a heavy, expensive silence. "We can reactivate your badge," Catherine said, her voice softer now. Bargaining. "Henry, just come in. We can fix this." Julian told me there was a misunderstanding about the invite list. "We can apologize. We can discuss a bonus." I told her it was not about the invite list, and it was not about a bonus. "Did Julian tell you about the consultants?" I asked. "What consultants?" she replied. I told her to ask him. Ask him about the invoices for Delta Strategic Group. Ask him why he billed the company $80,000 last quarter for code optimization that I wrote on a Saturday night for free. "Henry, you are treading on dangerous ground," she warned. "Accusing a vice president of fraud is a serious matter." I told her I was not accusing, I was informing, just like I informed the clients. And I suggested she ask Victoria why the compliance team, Alan and his entire staff, were not answering their phones this morning. "Alan is here," she said, sounding unsure. "I saw his car." I told her his car was company property and he had left the keys on his desk. He was currently sitting in a coffee shop across town with me, and the other engineers she had not realized were missing yet. "You poached them," she hissed. "That is solicitation. We will sue you into the ground, Henry. We will take your house, your pension, everything." I replied that I did not solicit anyone and told her to check their resignation letters. They all cited a hostile work environment and ethical concerns regarding leadership integrity. "If you sue me, you trigger discovery," I said. "Do you really want a court looking at Julian hard drive? Do you want a judge to see the emails where Victoria refers to the engineering staff as interchangeable cogs?" The line went dead. She had hung up. I smiled and took a bite of my toast. They were scrambling. They were trying to find a lever to pull, a button to push to make the machine work again. But I had taken the levers with me. 10 minutes later, my email pinged with a calendar invite. Emergency board review at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, in person. The location was the executive boardroom on the 12th floor. They were bypassing Julian. They were bypassing human resources. This was the big leagues. I arrived at the headquarters at 15 minutes to 1 o'clock. The atmosphere in the building had shifted. It was palpable. Usually the lobby was a buzz of activity, contractors moving in and out, receptionists juggling calls. Today it was quiet, tense. When I swiped my visitor pass, because my employee badge was indeed dead, the receptionist, a young woman named Alice, who always asked about my weekend, would not meet my eyes. She looked terrified. "They are waiting for you, Mr. Miller," she whispered. As I walked toward the elevators, I passed the glass-walled innovation lab. Usually this room was my domain. Today I saw three strangers in expensive suits hunched over a terminal. My terminal. They were external IT consultants, panic hired at $1,000 an hour to try and crack the Orion encryption before the production line stalled. I paused for a second, watching them. One of them, a guy with a ponytail, slammed his hand on the desk in frustration. He was trying to bypass the handshake protocol. He did not know that 3 failed attempts would trigger a system lockdown. He was on his second attempt. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the 12th floor. When the doors opened, Julian was waiting for me. He looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. His tie was loosened, his eyes were bloodshot, and the confident swagger was replaced by a twitchy, desperate energy. "You think you are smart?" Julian spat, stepping into my path before I could reach the boardroom. "You think you can hold the company hostage?" I told him I was not holding anything hostage and that I had just stopped carrying it. He grabbed my arm. It was a mistake. I stopped, looked at his hand on my sleeve, and then looked him in the eye. I told him to let go. He released me, but he leaned in close. "I spoke to the legal team," he whispered. "We know you kept copies of the source code on your personal drive. That is theft of trade secrets. You are going to prison, Henry." I asked him if that was what he had told them. "Did you tell them why I kept copies?" I asked. "Did you tell them about the version control issues? Or did you leave out the part where you deleted the safety backups in January to save server space for your marketing videos?" His face drained of color. "You cannot prove that," he whispered. I told him I could prove everything. "I have the logs." "Julian," I said, "I have the keystroke history. I have the deleted files recovered from the sector cache. And I have the invoices from Delta Strategic Group." Julian flinched as if I had hit him. "I am going into that room," I continued, my voice steady, "and I am going to present a choice. They can have the encryption keys and a smooth transition, or they can have the truth about your finances." "But they—" "You would not," he whispered. I told him to watch me. I pushed past him and opened the heavy oak doors of the boardroom. The room was freezing, the air conditioning was blasting, but the men and women seated around the long oval table looked like they were sweating. Catherine Brooks was at the head. Beside her was the chairman of the board, a man I had only seen in annual reports, and to his right, looking distinctly uncomfortable, was General Henderson, the client from the awards ceremony. This was worse than I thought. The client was not just on the phone, he was in the room. "Mr. Miller," the chairman said, his voice gravelly, "please sit down." I remained standing. I told him I preferred to stand. "We have a crisis," General Henderson said. "My tech team says the automated defense line for the Patriot missiles will shut down at 1400 hours if a specific biometric key is not entered. Is that correct?" "Yes, General. It is a fail-safe to prevent unauthorized modification. And you have the key?" "I was the only one trusted with it," I corrected. "This is extortion!" Julian shouted, bursting into the room behind me. "He is sabotaging the contract to demand a payout." "Sit down, Julian," Catherine barked. I looked at the general. "It is not extortion, it is negligence. For 8 months I requested that a secondary engineer be trained. I emailed Julian on February 12th, March 4th, and April 10th, warning of this risk. Here are printouts of those emails, and his replies stating that training was not in the budget." I slid the papers down the table. The chairman picked them up, reading the first one. His jaw tightened. "I am offering a solution," I said, addressing the room. "I will provide the unlock codes. I will spend the next 4 hours training a replacement of your choice. I recommend Owen Finch. He is young, but he is honest. I will ensure the general contract is secure." "In exchange for what?" the chairman asked. "In exchange for an immediate independent audit of the operations department financials," I said, locking eyes with Julian. specifically all external vendor payments approved by Julian Thorne in the last fiscal year, and I want a formal release from my non-compete clause. I am starting my own firm, and I am taking my team with me. The silence in the boardroom was heavy, preceding a structural collapse. Julian stood near the head of the table, his face a mask of panicked indignation. Fabricated, Julian choked out. This is all fabricated. He is hacking the system to frame me. I did not raise my voice. I had no need to do so. The data was the loudest thing in the room. It is easy to verify, Julian, I said, keeping my eyes on the chairman. The routing numbers for Delta Strategic Group terminate at an offshore account, but the initial deposit slips were faxed from a machine with a traceable header. That header matches the fax machine in the home office of your brother-in-law, Walter Davis. I have included the property tax records for Mr. Davis' residence on page 14. The chairman flipped to page 14. The sound of paper turning was like a gunshot. He scrutinized the document and then looked at Catherine Brooks. Catherine, the chairman said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Did you authorize these vendor payments? Catherine looked pale. Julian assured me they were critical path consultants for the Orion user interface, she stammered. He signed off on the deliverables. There were no deliverables, I interjected. Every line of code in the Orion update was written by user identification Henry Miller. There are no external commits, not one. Julian slammed his hand on the table. I am a vice president of this company. I demand security remove him immediately. Sit down, Mr. Thorne, the general rumbled, his voice low and vibrating with authority. This contract is funded by the Department of Defense. If these allegations are true, if you have been siphoning federal contract money into a shell company, that is federal embezzlement. That is treason against the taxpayer. Julian froze, looking gray. General, it is just an accounting error we can fix, he pleaded. Stop talking, the general commanded. He turned to the chairman. Is this man in charge of my missile defense systems? Because if he is, I am invoking the termination clause for gross negligence effective immediately. The chairman did not hesitate. He pressed the intercom button on the conference phone. Security to the executive boardroom immediately, he said. Julian looked around the room, pleading. He looked at Catherine. She looked away. Finally, he looked at me. Henry, he whispered, do not do this. I have a family. I can get you a raise. A big one. I looked at him, feeling only pity. You should have thought about that when you told me to wait outside, I said softly. 2 security guards entered. The chairman gestured. Escort Julian to his office and remove him from the building. Ensure he touches no electronic devices. This is a mistake, Julian screamed as they took his arms. You need me. His shouts echoed down the hallway. The chairman turned to me. You have your audit, Mr. Miller. Legal will draw up the release from your non-compete within the hour. Now unlock the system. I nodded. I need a terminal and I need Owen Finch. 5 minutes later, a laptop was placed in front of me. I connected it to the secure port. The screen displayed the red banner. System locked. Time remaining was 45 minutes. I began to type, sudo admin override off work key Orion 0 handshake protocol initiate. The system prompted for the biometric scan. I placed my thumb on the scanner. Identity confirmed, Henry Miller. Then the retinal scan. Access granted. The red banner turned a calming, steady green. System stable. Automation protocols active. The general actually nodded at me. A look of respect in his eyes. The crisis is averted, I said. But the underlying problem remains. The system needs a caretaker, not a manager. The door opened and Owen Finch stumbled in, looking terrified. Sit down, Owen, I said, pulling out the chair next to me. Open your notebook. We have a lot of work to do. For the next 3 hours, I focused entirely on Owen. I walked him through the architecture. I showed him the back doors I had sealed, the load-bearing algorithms. The checks required every morning at 8 o'clock. I poured 20 years of knowledge into him. I was passing it on to another engineer who cared about the work. Do you understand? I asked him. Owen looked at his notes. I think so, he said. It is beautiful, Henry. The logic is brilliant. It is just math, Owen, I said. But it is honest math. Keep it that way. I stood up. I believe our business is concluded, I said. The lawyer slid a document across the table. My release was signed and notarized, effective immediately. Mr. Miller, the general said as I picked up the paper. Summit Logistics values integrity. If your new venture requires beta testers, give my office a call. Thank you, General, I said. I walked out of the boardroom past the security desk and out the front doors. The sun was setting, casting long shadows. The air tasted sweet. The fall of Aegis Industries was a slow, grinding erosion that played out over the next 18 months. Without the core team of engineers who had left with me, the company's ability to innovate stalled completely. They hired expensive replacements, but they did not understand the legacy systems. Patches failed, deadlines slipped, and the optics that Julian and Victoria had valued so highly began to blur. Julian did not just lose his job. The audit I forced triggered a federal investigation. He was indicted on 5 counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. I saw his mug shot on the local news one evening. He looked smaller than I remembered. Victoria lasted another 6 months before being quietly let go. She tried to pivot to a consulting career, but word travels fast in our industry. When you choose the wrong side of a competence crisis, people tend to remember. As for me, I did not buy a yacht. I leased a converted warehouse in the industrial district. It had brick walls, high ceilings, but fantastic fiber optic connectivity. I put a sign on the door, Miller and Partners Systems Architecture. The partners were Liam, Alan, Grace, and the others. We did not have titles, and we did not have a human resources department. What we had was work. Good, complex, difficult work. We built a system where the code was the currency, and the only hierarchy was based on who had the best solution. Our first contract was with a mid-sized logistics firm. We fixed their supply chain bottleneck in 3 days. They told 2 friends. 6 months in, the phone rang. It was Albert Ross from Summit Logistics. "Henry," he said, "the general is tired of the excuses from Aegis. The new Orion update is buggy. Can you fix it?" "I can rebuild it," I said. "But it will cost you, and we own the intellectual property this time. You just license the results." "Send the contract," Albert said. That contract validated our model. It proved that you just needed the people who actually knew how to turn the screws. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, about a year after I walked out of that boardroom, I was sitting at my desk, reviewing a diagnostic report. The warehouse was humming with quiet activity. Liam was arguing with Grace about server load, but they were laughing. The door buzzer rang. Standing there, soaked from the rain, was Owen Finch. He was wearing an Aegis Industries badge that looked heavy around his neck. "Henry," he said, wiping rain from his glasses. "Owen," I said, "come in and dry off." He saw the equipment, the lack of pretension, and the focus. "I tried," he said, accepting a towel. "I really tried to keep it running, but they will not listen. They hired a new vice president, and he is just like Julian. He wants me to cut corners on safety protocols to hit a quarterly target. I cannot do it, Henry. I cannot sign my name to bad work." I smiled. It was the same look I had seen in the mirror. "You do not have to," I said, pointing to an empty desk in the corner. It was already set up with a dual monitor rig. I had set it up a week ago, knowing this day would come. "We have an opening," I said. "Junior systems architect. The pay is decent and the hours are long, but you will never have to wait outside while someone else takes credit for your work." Owen looked at the desk, then back at me. He reached up, unclipped his Aegis badge, and dropped it into the trash can by the door. "When do I start?" "Grab a coffee," I said, clapping him on the shoulder. "We have a buffer overflow in the Summit project that needs fresh eyes." I walked back to my desk and sat down. I looked out the window at the rain. I thought about the awards ceremony. It felt like a lifetime ago. I realized then that Victoria was right about one thing. I was a technical contributor. That is all I ever wanted to be. And here in this drafty warehouse with my team, I was finally the one deciding what that meant. The system was stable, the network was secure.